intermittent fasting mistakes that make you gain weight. Most people are usually very successful at losing weight on intermittent fasting, but there are some that don't do so well. They might actually plateau or even gain weight. So today we're going to talk about 15 intermittent fasting mistakes that you want to avoid so that you can reach your goal, so you can lose the weight, lose the fat, and keep the muscle. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss anything. Today we're going to cover several different scenarios. We're going to assume that most people are doing intermittent fasting to lose weight. So we want to talk about how to avoid gaining weight, but also if people plateau, we want to make sure that they're not losing muscle and gaining fat, and we're going to talk about how to get back on that weight loss journey. When we do intermittent fasting, there are 5 things that we want to have happen, and we're going to relate the successes and mistakes to those. So the first thing is you want to burn fat. You want to burn fat off the body. You want to maintain your basal metabolic rate. You don't want your basal metabolic rate, your metabolism, to slow down and make it almost impossible for you to lose weight in the future. That's what happens with calorie restriction and yo-yo diets. You need to reduce your insulin resistance because insulin is the primary storage hormone. It's the primary reason people are overweight as well as getting pre-diabetic and diabetic. We want to keep the muscle. Most people are afraid of fasting. They think that they will lose muscle. They've been told that, oh yeah, you'll lose some weight, but it's mostly muscle. That's not true, and we'll talk about why. You also want to increase growth hormone. And growth hormone is a very beneficial hormone. It is muscle sparing, it increases metabolism, and it is also a generally recognized anti-aging hormone. So it's sort of a byproduct and a component of this whole process. The number one mistake that people make is they eat too many carbs. I get a lot of comments on my OMAD, my 1 meal a day videos, and people say that, oh, for me it doesn't matter, I can do a high carb OMAD and I still lose weight, and other people say that, oh, I can't lose weight if I eat any carbs. So realize that everyone is different. Some people can eat moderate or even high carbs, and if they fast long enough, then they would not become insulin resistant. They can reverse their insulin resistance with some carbs. So that's not true for most people. And if you want to play it safe, then you want to limit your carbs. So for the most part, if you're not losing weight, you're probably eating too many carbs, and the carbs are triggering insulin and maintaining your insulin resistance, keeping you in storage mode, making it impossible for your body to actually burn the fuel off your body. The number 2 mistake is eating too much protein. A lot of people, again, are having success with carnivore diets, and a lot of people are eating a high protein diet, and that's great for them. But if your body is really stubborn and you're having some trouble, if you're plateauing, chances are that your protein is too high because protein will also trigger insulin and maintain your insulin resistance. Number 3 mistake, eating too much fat. So even though the keto and the low carb high fat and the low carb movement and the intermittent fasting principles, they all talk about eating less carbs and higher fat, it's still possible to eat too much fat. And how do you know? Well, if you're eating so much fat, if you're putting so much fat into your system on a regular basis that there is no need for your body to burn the fat off the stores on the body, then you're eating too much fat. It is very difficult to eat too much fat because your body will say no. You get much more satiated, you get fuller, and you get satisfied longer when you cut back on carbs and you eat more fat, but it's still possible. So we need to realize that as a factor, that it is possible to eat too much fat. If you're not losing weight, then that could be it. Number 4, you could be eating too many calories. We don't want to focus on calories, but in the end, it's still about calories in, calories out. The reason we don't want to focus on calories is if you try to cut back, then you will typically lower your basal metabolic rate. That's what people have done with their yo-yo diets and their calorie restrictions for most of their lives, and they've been monumentally unsuccessful. But we still have to realize that it's about calories, and it's still possible to eat too many. So if you eat really, really delicious food that invites you to overeat, if you eat a lot of keto bombs and you eat some things that just makes it easy to eat a lot, and let's say you have a 16-8 intermittent fasting pattern, and you eat 3 meals a day and you just eat a lot of food on those 3 meals, then you probably had to work at it, but it's still very possible to eat too many calories. Number 5 mistake is eating too few calories. And that sounds funny. It's like, well, how can the opposite cause the same problem? Well, if we eat fewer calories, then there's a chance that we will reduce our metabolism, that we will reduce our basal metabolic rate. And to really understand why, we have to look at number 6, the difference between a low-calorie diet and fasting. Because fasting is a low-calorie diet. It is limiting the calories. It is limiting the fuel intake, but it's not doing it by reducing the size of small, frequent meals. It is doing it by eating fewer meals. And there's a world of difference in how the body interprets that. You could make it even worse eating low-calorie, eating small, frequent meals if you eat a lot of carbs. But even if you don't, you're still giving the body signals several times a day. So let's say you're eating 3 meals a day. You're giving your body insulin signals 3 times a day to store something. And if you're always eating a little bit less than you really want, if you're restricting your calories, then 2 things happen. First, your body perceives lack. It senses that there's just never quite enough. The food keeps coming on a regular basis, but there's never quite enough. I'd better slow down my metabolism and save some for a rainy day. However, that does not happen with fasting. If you eat fewer meals, but you eat till you're full, then the body says, oh, I don't know when the next meal is going to come, but when I get it, it's always plenty. And in those cases, the body does not lower the metabolism, the basal metabolic rate. So you could eat, let's say that you want to have your body burn 2,000 calories, and then you eat 3 small meals at 500 calories, then it might seem like you'd be at a 500 calorie deficit, but because the body perceives a deficiency, a lack, a starvation, it's going to lower the basal metabolic rate until you plateau. The beauty of the intermittent fasting is you could eat a lot. You could eat 2,000 calories every other day, which turns out to be 1,000 calories per day, but with no loss of metabolism, you're actually going to burn 1,000 calories off the body. So it's really critical to understand the difference, and this has been verified in studies that this is how it works. Even if low-calorie diets can make you lose some weight initially, your body figures it out and it plateaus relatively quickly. Number 7 mistake is you're not drinking enough water. Everyone always wants to know, what can I drink when I'm fasting? And they're focusing on the coffee and the tea and the herb tea and the drinks of various kinds. But water is still your drink of choice. Even though you could have some coffee, you could have some tea, you still want to drink mostly water. And you want to make sure that you get enough minerals, because minerals hold water. It's osmotic pressure. The water in the body is held by minerals. When you lose minerals, you lose fluid, and vice versa. So you want to keep up the intake of both. And one thing that can happen is that you think you're hungry when in fact you're just thirsty. So a lot of times by just drinking some salt water or just water, then you find that, hey, I wasn't hungry after all. Number 8 mistake is to get out of control. If you get too hungry, if you go at it too fast, if you don't give your body time to get fat adapted, if you go straight for a fast that's too long, longer than your body is capable of handling, if it's shocked, then you might get so hungry that you just freak out and you say, oh, I have to eat something, and you eat just about anything. So the risk here is that you overeat or you eat low quality food or high carb or sugar or things like that. And now obviously that defeats the purpose of the fasting. So don't let yourself get too hungry. Do things gradually, learn how your body reacts, plan your food out, and know ahead of time what you're going to do. Number 9 mistake is to not exercise. So even though it is possible to lose weight without exercise, it's really irrelevant because exercise has so many benefits for your health that you don't even want to consider not exercising. Optimum health is not possible without exercise, so just do it. Now, for fasting purposes and for insulin and cortisol and growth hormone purposes, there are certain ways that you want to exercise, and I've done several videos on that. But the thing to understand is weightlifting and high intensity exercise tends to trigger a lot of growth hormone. So extended fasting, I don't know exactly the numbers of where this kicks in after how long, but if you fast for a solid week or so, you can increase your growth hormone by 1,200%. And it's obviously some sort of gradual increase up to that peak point of growth hormone. Now, high intensity exercise can increase it by itself by about 300 to 400%. So fasting and exercise, high intensity exercise, work together to drive up that growth hormone. And if you exercise while fasted, then you amplify that benefit. Now the key is that you don't want to spend a lot of time in the anaerobic mode, because now if you're huffing and puffing, your body switches from burning mostly fat to burning mostly carbs. And because you don't have a lot of carbs in your system, now your body is going to make cortisol, which is a stress hormone. It's going to break down muscle so that it can use the protein to make glucose via gluconeogenesis. So there are many, many reasons why you want to understand how to exercise. So walking is great because it's low intensity and you don't trigger cortisol. Cortisol triggers insulin and drives insulin resistance, whereas short duration, high intensity, even though it's anaerobic, it's so short that you don't trigger a lot of cortisol, but you still get the growth hormone benefits. So if you hit a plateau and you haven't been exercising, that could very well be the reason. So don't even question it, just do it anyway. Number 10, stress. We just talked about cortisol from anaerobic exercise, long duration anaerobic exercise, but stress in itself can also do that. All forms of stress, whether it's physical stress from exercise, or it's just emotional stress, or you just sort of, that's your lifestyle. If you're in stress, if you feel stressed, if you feel tense, then you will make higher cortisol levels. Cortisol will increase glucose, blood sugar, and you will increase insulin, and you will make yourself more insulin resistant, not less. That's a very powerful factor that we don't want to overlook. Sleep goes together with that as well. So poor quality sleep, not enough sleep, irregular sleep, sleeping at different hours of the day, not getting a continuous sleep during the dark period of the day, all of those constitute poor sleep. They will increase cortisol. They are a form of stress, and you will have a much harder time to reverse your insulin resistance if you don't sleep well. Number 12 mistake is that you don't change things up. That your body, if you make it too patterned, if you make it too regular, if your intermittent fasting times and your eating patterns, if they're too repetitious, they're too much the same, then your body gets used to it and it says, oh, I've got this, I don't need to change anything, I'll just sort of settle in right here. So you always want to change things up. You don't want to stay on OMAD forever, you don't want to do 18-6 forever, you don't want to do 36-hour fasts. You change it up. You do some 18-6, you do some 36 hours, you do a couple of 3-day fasts. You change it, and you also change the amounts of foods and the types of foods because your body will adapt to anything. The last 3 items on my list are, I have question marks on them because they're very often brought up on other channels, and I don't know for sure to what extent they're true, but I'm kind of questioning whether they're a big deal. Number 13 here is combining carbs and fat when you break a fast. And the thinking there is that after you've been fasting, you haven't been making insulin, so your body is very insulin sensitive. Yes, it is more insulin sensitive than it was, but if you have been extremely insulin resistant for many, many years, you're not going to get rid of that in a single fast, whether it's a week or 2 weeks even. So you're not going to become extremely insulin sensitive just like that. The other reason that I'm kind of questioning that a little bit is that your body is pretty smart. So even though you are more insulin sensitive than you were before the fast, all that means is that even if you eat some carbs, your body is not going to make excess insulin. Because you're more insulin sensitive, your body will not make so much insulin, will make just enough to handle the food you ate based on the level of insulin sensitivity that you have now. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you go crazy and eat a bunch of junk carbs. You still want to eat a low-carb diet, but it's not that you have to be extremely careful just because of that. And again, this is my opinion. I don't have any solid facts or results to back that up, but I don't think it's such a big deal. Number 14 is sweeteners. And of course, they're not talking about sugar. They're talking about stevia and monk fruit and chicory root and the non-calorie sweeteners. I'm assuming that if you've been watching this channel that you won't touch the artificial non-calorie sweeteners because they're basically poison and they will not do you any good. So here's why they talk about them so much. There's something called a cephalic response, that anytime that you put something in your mouth that tastes sweet, your brain will send a signal to the pancreas to make insulin because it's expecting, based on the sweet taste, that you ate some sugar. It thinks, hey, there's some sugar, there's some carbs coming, I better be prepared, so it kicks out some insulin. Now, my thinking is that this is a very minute response because there is so little carbohydrate in your system that there probably won't be much of an insulin response. And here's how you can check for yourself. So you get a glucose meter and you monitor before and after having some of that sweetener. And here's what you want to have happen. Some people think that, oh, it's like sugar, so it's going to raise my blood sugar. And that's probably not what's going to happen. Again, I can't guarantee how your body's going to react. It's possible you eat something sweet and your liver kicks out some extra glucose from glycogen. But for most people, what's going to happen is that you taste sweet, you increase your insulin, but there's no sugar actually coming into the system. So your blood sugar should be lower after having that sweetener because you get an insulin response, but there's no actual food. So here's the thing to watch for. If you get an enormous drop, then that's a problem for you. You should stay away from that sweetener. If you drink this stuff many, many times a day and you get yourself hypoglycemic, that would be really bad. But my guess for most people is that there probably will be no difference, or it will drop maybe a point or two. And that's not a big deal because, again, in your bloodstream you have less than a teaspoon of sugar at any given time. And if your blood sugar drops by a point or two, we're talking a difference in milligrams. You're not going to change your insulin resistance because you're not driving any fuel into the cell. We're talking milligrams, if that. If you're curious, and I think it's a good idea for you to check, then see what happens. If you don't become hypoglycemic, then you can probably do that, at least in moderation. Number 15 mistake, bulletproof coffee and bone broth. Does it break a fast? Yes, it breaks the fast. But what are we really after? We're looking to burn fat, keep up the basal metabolic rate, reduce insulin resistance, keep the muscle, increase growth hormone. If it doesn't mess with that, then it's okay. So the question is, how much are you having? If you're doing a fast and it's the difference between you breaking the fast completely or helping you through it, then it's a good thing. Then you should have your bulletproof coffee, you should have your bone broth. If it helps you get another 6 hours or another 12 hours or an extra day or two on your fast, then do it because it's helping you. But if you're doing OMAD or if you're doing an 18-6 and you're having each bulletproof coffee is 300 to 400 to 500 calories and you have 2 of those a day, then chances are that it's going to have you take too many calories, too much fat. It's going to keep you from reaching these goals just because you're violating so many of these principles. So you got to use some common sense, and I would say it's okay if it helps you through the fast and it will still reduce your insulin resistance. But again, if you hit a plateau, then chances are you are violating some of these rules, and then you're probably better cutting it out. So you want to understand the principles around these. You want to understand that people react differently, and once you understand them, you can try them out and see what happens. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, change it up. Go one step further. Do one thing more to get the results you want. These are all tools, and the more that you apply the tools, the better your results. Some people just have to do a little bit, some people have to do a lot. Ultimately, you just want to make sure that you're burning the fat, that you're maintaining or increasing your basal metabolic rate, that you're reducing your insulin resistance, and that you're keeping your muscle. So again, growth hormone is going to help you keep your muscle, and the weight training and the high intensity training, the interval training, is going to increase the growth hormone, but it's also going to use your muscles. It's going to strain your muscles. It's going to stress your muscles to give your body an extra incentive to build more muscle as it repairs the damage from the exercise. So realize that exercise is damage. That's the whole point, that you're stressing, you're damaging, so the body has to rebuild it bigger, and that would be an extra incentive to keep the muscle. But I wouldn't go and do super hard extended workouts because now you'll probably trigger some cortisol, and if you're fasting, you probably don't have all the resources to maintain that muscle at that point. So do your weights, keep it short. Do your high intensity interval training, keep it short. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this kind of information, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you'd like to learn more about how to get truly healthy, then make sure that you check out our other videos on fasting and insulin resistance. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.